Have you ever felt like life has passed you by? Like the dreams you once held have turned to dust? Like God has forgotten your name? There was a priest named Zechariah. A good man. A faithful man. But a tired man. Every day he served in the temple, watching younger families celebrate their children while his own home remained silent. His wife, Elizabeth, carried a different kind of pain. Society whispered about her. Pitied her. Blamed her. Barren. Empty. Cursed. They had prayed for decades. But heaven seemed silent. Hope had become a distant memory until one day, in the shadows of the altar, everything changed. An angel appeared. A promise was spoken. A miracle was announced, but the greatest breakthroughs often come wrapped in the hardest tests. And Zechariah was about to learn that the price of a miracle is sometimes your own voice. This is the untold story behind John the Baptist. The impossible pregnancy that changed history. Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe, like and share for more uncovering of hidden truths from history and scriptural tales. The temple was quiet. Too quiet. Incense smoke rose in thin spirals, curling toward the vaulted ceiling like prayers searching for heaven. Zechariah stood alone at the altar, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted the burning coals. His beard was gray now. His shoulders bent. His eyes carried the weight of years. He had served faithfully. Kept the law. Honored God. But the blessing he longed for most had never come. A child. His wife, Elizabeth, was barren. And in their culture, that word was heavier than stone. It whispered shame. It screamed failure. It felt like divine rejection. He closed his eyes, voice barely a whisper. Lord, did you forget me? The smoke drifted upward. Silence answered. But then, something shifted in the air. The temperature dropped. The shadows moved. Zechariah's breath caught. His eyes snapped open. A figure stood by the altar. Tall. Radiant. Terrifying. Not human. Zechariah's knees buckled. His heart hammered against his ribs. Because heaven had just broken its 400-year silence. And the message was about to shatter his world. The figure stepped forward. Light rippled around him like water made of fire. His presence filled the room, pressing against Zechariah's chest like the weight of eternity. Do not fear, Zechariah. The voice was calm. Steady. But it carried power that made the stone walls tremble. Zechariah gasped, falling to his knees. How can I not? The angel's eyes were kind but piercing. I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. And I have been sent to bring you good news. Good news? Zechariah's mind spun. Angels didn't appear for good news. They appeared for judgment. For war. For nations about to fall. Your prayer has been heard, Gabriel continued. Prayer? Which prayer? Zechariah had prayed 1,000 prayers over the years. Most of them felt like echoes in an empty canyon. Elizabeth will bear you a son. And you are to call him John. The words hit like thunder. A son. Elizabeth. After all these years? Zechariah's throat tightened. Hope flickered, but doubt flooded faster. But Gabriel wasn't finished. His next words would carry weight beyond anything Zechariah could imagine. Gabriel's voice deepened, each word landing with prophetic force. He will be great in the sight of the Lord. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will turn many of the people of Israel back to God. And he will go before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. Zechariah's hands trembled. His mind reeled. Elijah? The prophet who called down fire from heaven? The one who never died but was taken up in a chariot of flames? Gabriel continued. He will prepare a people ready for the Lord. The room seemed to pulse with divine electricity. This wasn't just about a baby. This was about destiny. About the Messiah. About the end of heaven's silence. Zechariah's chest tightened. His thoughts flashed to Elizabeth, her tears, her prayers, the quiet sorrow she carried every day. Could this be real? Or was this cruel hope dressed as prophecy? His mouth opened before he could stop himself. The question slipped out, half doubt, half desperation. How can I be sure of this? The moment the words left his lips, the air shifted. Gabriel's expression changed. Not anger. But sorrow mixed with finality. Zechariah had just made a terrible mistake. Gabriel's eyes hardened. The warmth drained from the room. I am Gabriel, he said slowly, each word deliberate. I stand in the presence of God. And I was sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. Zechariah's breath caught. But now, Gabriel continued, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time, you will be silent. Unable to speak. Until the day this happens. Zechariah opened his mouth to protest, to apologize, to beg for mercy. Nothing came out. Not a sound. Not a whisper. Not even breath shaped into words. His throat moved. His lips formed shapes. But silence was all that remained. Panic flooded his chest. He clutched his throat, eyes wide with terror. Gabriel's form began to fade, dissolving back into light. Remember, Zechariah. God's promises do not need your belief to become real. They only need His word. And then, he was gone. Zechariah stood alone in the temple. The incense still burned. The altar still glowed. But his voice was gone. And his silence would soon become its own prison. Zechariah stumbled out of the temple, legs shaking, heart pounding. The crowd outside waited expectantly, family, worshippers, fellow priests. What happened in there? Someone asked. Zechariah opened his mouth. Nothing. He tried again. Silence. Confusion rippled through the crowd. People exchanged glances. Whispers began. Did something go wrong? Is he all right? Why won't he speak? Zechariah grabbed a piece of parchment and scribbled frantically. But how could he explain? How could he write what he didn't fully understand himself? He walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. Shame burned in his chest. Frustration clawed at his throat. He had seen an angel. Received a promise. And all he could think about was the doubt that had cost him his voice. Elizabeth was waiting at the door when he arrived. Her face brightened when she saw him, but then fell as she noticed his expression. Zechariah, she asked softly. What's wrong? He stared at her, eyes filling with tears. He tried to speak. To explain. To tell her everything. But nothing came out. Their eyes met. And something unspoken passed between them, fear, confusion, and the terrifying possibility that their lives were about to change forever. Elizabeth had learned to live with silence. Not the kind that came from a missing voice. But the kind that came from a missing child. 4 years, she had endured the whispers. The pitying glances. The assumptions. Perhaps she sinned. Maybe God is punishing her. She must have done something wrong. Each word was a small death. Each glance a quiet accusation. She had prayed. Begged. Wept in secret. But her womb remained empty. Her arms remained barren. Now, as she watched Zechariah struggle to communicate, fear gripped her heart. Something had happened in the temple. Something profound. Something terrifying. That night, alone in the darkness, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered into the void. Maybe you have forgotten me, Lord. Maybe I'm too old. Too broken. Too, nothing. Zechariah reached for her hand. He couldn't speak. But his grip said everything. I'm here. We're in this together. Weeks passed. The silence between them deepened. But then, one morning, Elizabeth woke feeling different. A warmth. A shift. Something impossible beginning. Her hand moved to her stomach. Her breath stopped. Could it be? Elizabeth stood frozen in the morning light, her hand pressed against her stomach. She felt it again. A flutter. A stirring. Something alive. She gasped, eyes wide. Zechariah. He looked up from his table, where he'd been writing another frustrated attempt to explain the unexplainable. Zechariah, I think I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like smoke. Impossible. Absurd. Divine. Zechariah dropped his stylus. His eyes locked on hers. Disbelief. Hope. Fear. All swirling together. He crossed the room in 3 strides and placed his hand gently on her stomach. Tears filled his eyes. Elizabeth's voice trembled. Say something. He couldn't. But his tears said everything. Weeks turned into months. The pregnancy became undeniable. Her body changed. Her heart soared. But fear crept in alongside joy. We should hide this, Elizabeth said one evening. At least for a while. Zechariah nodded. He felt it too. Something about this pregnancy felt dangerous. Like it threatened powers beyond their understanding. So they stayed inside. Avoided crowds. Told no one. But secrets have a way of slipping out. And this one would soon reach ears that should never have heard it. The village buzzed with rumors. Have you seen Elizabeth lately? She's hiding something. At her age? Impossible. This isn't natural. The whispers grew louder. Neighbors watched their house. Some with curiosity. Some with suspicion. some with something darker, envy disguised as concern. Elizabeth felt the weight of their stares even through closed doors. The shame she thought she'd escaped was trying to return. But something else stirred in the shadows. Strange things began happening around their home. Animals grew restless. Candles flickered without wind. An unease settled over the village like fog. Zechariah felt it most at night, a presence. Watching. Waiting. Resisting. Spiritual forces were aligning. Because this child wasn't just a baby. He was a threat. A forerunner. A voice that would shake kingdoms. And darkness never surrenders territory without a fight. Then one afternoon, a knock came at the door. Elizabeth hesitated. They weren't expecting anyone. She opened it slowly. A young girl stood there. Barely more than a teenager. Her eyes bright with urgency. "Elizabeth?" the girl asked breathlessly. "Yes?" The girl smiled. "I'm Mary. And I have something to tell you." The moment Mary stepped inside, something shifted. The air grew thick with divine presence. Elizabeth felt it before she understood it. A sudden jolt. A violent leap inside her womb. She gasped, doubling over, her hand flying to her stomach. John, still unborn, was responding. Not to Mary, but to what Mary carried. Elizabeth's eyes widened. Tears spilled down her cheeks. The Holy Spirit flooded her, words pouring out that weren't her own. "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear." Mary froze, stunned. Elizabeth continued, voice trembling with awe. "But why am I so favored, that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" The words hung heavy. Sacred. Impossible. Mother of my Lord. Mary's hand moved to her own stomach. Tears filled her eyes. Elizabeth stepped closer, gripping Mary's hands. "The moment your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy." The two women stood together, two impossible pregnancies, two miraculous callings, two destinies intertwined. Zechariah watched from the corner, unable to speak but seeing everything. Heaven was moving. Prophecy was unfolding. But Mary carried news that would shake Elizabeth even further. A secret that connected their sons forever. Mary stayed with Elizabeth for 3 months. And in that time, she told her everything. The angel Gabriel. The impossible announcement. The shadow of the Most High. The child who would be called the Son of God. Elizabeth listened, breathless. Her mind reeled. 2 miraculous pregnancies. Both announced by the same angel. Both defying nature. Both wrapped in mystery and danger. "Your son," Mary whispered one evening, "will prepare the way for mine." Elizabeth's hand moved to her swollen belly. "A forerunner." Mary nodded. The voice crying in the wilderness. They sat in silence, the weight of their shared destinies pressing down like the sky itself. But outside their quiet home, darkness was stirring. In the royal palace, King Herod heard whispers. Rumors of unusual pregnancies among priestly families. Strange prophecies. Divine visitations. His paranoia flared. He had built his throne on blood and fear. And he would not lose it to prophesize about babies. He summoned his advisors. "Watch the priests. Especially the old ones. If anything unusual happens, I want to know." And one pair of eyes had already noticed something strange. A priest who no longer spoke. A wife who no longer appeared in public. A silence that felt too deliberate. Herod sat on his throne, fingers drumming against the armrest. His eyes were sharp. Calculating. Dangerous. "Tell me again," he said coldly. A servant bowed. "The priest Zechariah. He came out of the temple months ago, unable to speak. Some say he saw a vision. Others say he was cursed." Herod leaned forward. "And his wife?" "Elizabeth. She's been in seclusion. But there are rumors, she may be with child." Herod's jaw tightened. "At her age. That's what makes it unusual, my lord." Herod's mind spun. Prophets. Miracles. Children born of impossible circumstances. He'd heard the stories before. And they always ended with someone trying to take his throne. "Keep watch," he ordered. "If this child is born, I want to know immediately." The servant bowed and left. Herod stared into the shadows, paranoia gnawing at him like a disease. He had killed his own sons to protect his crown. He would not hesitate to kill a priest's child. But this child wasn't just any child. He was marked by heaven. Protected by prophecy. And no earthly king could stop what God had already set in motion. Still, Herod would try. And his spies were already closing in. Weeks later, temple officials came to Zechariah's home. Their faces were stern. Their questions sharp. Why did you stop speaking, Zechariah? He grabbed his writing tablet, hands shaking. Did something happen in the temple? He scribbled furiously, I saw an angel. The officials exchanged glances. Skepticism flickered in their eyes. An angel, one repeated slowly. And this angel made you mute. Zechariah nodded, writing quickly, I doubted. This is my consequence. Convenient, another muttered. A story no one can verify. Zechariah's frustration boiled over. He slammed the tablet down, pointing at Elizabeth's swollen belly. We've heard about that too, the lead official said coldly. At her age? Some are saying it's unnatural. Elizabeth stepped forward, voice steady despite her fear. What God has done is not for you to question. The officials stared at her. Then at Zechariah. Then back at her. We'll be watching, one said finally. They left. But the threat lingered in the air. Zechariah sat down heavily, exhausted. Helpless. Unable to defend himself. Unable to protect his family. Elizabeth's time was drawing near. And danger was closing in like a storm. The night Elizabeth went into labor, a storm rolled across Judea. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the walls. Inside their small home, Elizabeth screamed. Sweat poured down her face. Her body trembled with each contraction. Zechariah held her hand, his own face pale with fear. He couldn't speak. Couldn't comfort her with words. Only presence. The midwife worked quickly, her voice calm but urgent. Push, Elizabeth. Push. Hours passed. The storm raged. The night seemed endless. Then, a cry. Sharp. Strong. Piercing the darkness like a blade of light. Elizabeth collapsed back, gasping. Tears streamed down her face. The midwife lifted the baby, wrapping him in cloth. A boy. Zechariah's tears fell freely now. His hands shook as he reached for the child. A son. After all these years. After all the pain. After all the waiting. The baby's cry filled the room, loud, bold, unafraid. Elizabeth smiled weakly. He has a voice. Thank God, he has a voice. But the storm outside hadn't ended. And neither had the battle surrounding this child. The naming ceremony was coming. And it would become a battlefield of destinies. 8 days later, family and friends gathered for the naming ceremony. The room buzzed with conversation. An elder stepped forward. We will name the boy after his father. Zechariah. Elizabeth's voice cut through the chatter. No. Everyone turned. His name is John. Confusion rippled through the crowd. John? There's no one in your family named John. It doesn't matter, Elizabeth said firmly. His name is John. The relatives looked at each other, uncomfortable. This was breaking tradition. Breaking custom. Surely Zechariah should decide, someone said. All eyes turned to the silent priest. Zechariah sat holding his son, tears in his eyes. This was the moment. The final test of faith. Would he trust the angel's word? Or bow to human pressure? He reached for a writing tablet. The room fell silent. Every eye watched as his hand moved across the surface, carving letters with deliberate precision. He held it up. The words were clear, his name is John. The moment the tablet was visible, something broke in the spiritual realm. Heaven's seal released. God's promise fulfilled. Zechariah's mouth opened. And for the first time in 9 months, sound came out. His name is John. Zechariah's voice erupted like thunder. Strong. Clear. Filled with power. The room gasped. Some stumbled backward. Others fell to their knees. Zechariah didn't stop. Words poured out, not his own words, but prophecy. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. His voice shook the walls. The Holy Spirit flooded him, unlocking months of silence in a torrent of divine declaration. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. Elizabeth wept, clutching the baby to her chest. Zechariah's eyes blazed with holy fire as he turned toward his son. And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High. For you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him. The room was electric. Fear and awe mingled together. No one moved. No one spoke. Because they were witnessing something beyond themselves. A moment when heaven touched earth. When silence broke into song. When doubt transformed into destiny. But Zechariah's prophecy wasn't finished. And what came next would reveal the true weight of John's calling. Zechariah's voice softened, but the power didn't leave. He looked down at his son, tears streaming. And you, child, will be called the prophet of the Most High. You will go before the Lord to prepare the way for him. He paused, his voice trembling with emotion and revelation. To give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins. The room held its breath. Zechariah's vision shifted. He saw beyond the present moment. Saw deserts. Saw crowds. Saw his son, older, thinner, wild, standing in the wilderness, voice like a trumpet. He will be a voice, Zechariah whispered. A voice crying in the wilderness. Preparing the way. Making straight the paths. The image flickered. John standing in water. Baptizing. Shouting truth to power. Confronting kings. Risking everything. Then darkness. Chains. A prison cell. A final moment of courage. Zechariah's breath caught. His son's destiny was glorious and costly. John would prepare the way for the Messiah. But the path would demand everything from him. His comfort. His safety. His very life. Elizabeth saw the shift in Zechariah's expression. She pulled John closer, as if to shield him from the future. But destiny cannot be avoided. Only embraced. Zechariah and Elizabeth stood together, holding their son as the room slowly emptied. The guests left in stunned silence, carrying stories that would spread across Judea. Elizabeth looked down at John, her voice soft. We waited so long for you. Zechariah placed his hand on the baby's head. And you were worth every moment. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky cleared. Stars emerged like witnesses to what had just unfolded. But this moment, small and quiet in a humble home, was shaking the spiritual world. Angels watched. Demons trembled. Heaven rejoiced. Because this child's cry wasn't just the sound of a baby. It was the sound of prophecy awakening. Of silence breaking. Of a voice being born that would one day shout truth into the face of kings. Zechariah whispered, his voice thick with emotion, when heaven seems silent, it may be gathering breath for a miracle. Elizabeth smiled through her tears. Our years of waiting birthed a voice that will awaken nations. They held their son close, knowing his life would be anything but ordinary. Knowing his path would be hard. Knowing his destiny was greater than they could fully comprehend. Because this impossible pregnancy didn't just change their lives. It changed history. And the story was only beginning. 6 powerful, shareable life lessons. Delayed is not denied, God's timing is not slow, it's strategic. What feels like a closed door may be preparation for an open heaven. Your deepest pain can become the birthplace of your purpose. Elizabeth's barrenness became the womb of a prophet. Silence is not absence, heaven often works in hidden ways. Zechariah's muteness was not punishment, it was preparation. Obedience unlocks miracles that unbelief delays. The moment Zechariah wrote his name is John, heaven moved. What people call too late, God calls right on time. Age, circumstance, and impossibility mean nothing to divine purpose. Every destiny begins in a moment nobody expected. Your breakthrough may be one obedient step away.